Bubbles, welcome to the War Room. I know you are no stranger to joining us here, but often you are on the expert panel. We've also seen you as a caster, but this weekend you have made the main event of the OCC. So we'll definitely chat about that a little bit later. But I want to just get to know you a little bit more and get give you an opportunity to chat with the community and get a little bit out there around some of your background and stuff like that. So how are you doing today, Bubbles?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I am excited to have a chat with you because I've had you on the show so often, and you're usually accompanied by darkness, and we're talking strategy or some bigger cards topics. But I'm excited to just chat a little bit about yourselves. Maybe we can just start simply with what got you into cards to begin with.
Uh, so if I remember correct, I wanted to play a new card game. I've played a lot of card games, and I wanted to play a new one. And I went onto the Steam store, and I filtered by card, the card filter. And then I clicked the first one that looked interesting, and it just so happened to be cards. And here we are, a year and a half later.
Right on. So you mentioned you had played some other card games in the past. Was there any kind of main game you spent a lot of time in or sunk a lot of hours in, or were you kind of just jumping around from game to game until you got the cards?
I grew up playing Magic the Gathering for as long as I could remember. It was never competitive. It was always super, super casual among friends. We had like our own special sort of pseudo rules, like if you're mana screwed, you have just land or no land in your hand. You could sort of say to your opponent, "Can you shuffle my deck? This is terrible. Just shuffle my deck for me." Or if we're having a particularly boring game where nothing was happening, we'd be like, "Should everyone just draw a card? Everyone draw a card? We'll just draw an extra card to spice things up." So sort of just rules to make it more enjoyable and to try and fix some of the game's core mechanical issues of things like mana screw and all this. But it was always just casual, never anything competitive or anything at all like that.
Got it. And then had you made the transition into any other digital card games, or was it really just kind of paper magic for you? And then all of a sudden you're searching through the Steam store and you find cards.
So I played Magic Arena a little
Okay.
bit, but Magic Arena is almost impossible to play free to play unless you're like a draft wizard, because you can go infinite in draft, but you have to be really good at draft to do that. I opened it up recently, and I was talking to a friend of mine. I was like, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing some Magic Arena, and I want to build a competitive deck." He was like, "I spent $300 and I was able to build one competitive deck." And then I was like, "Okay, maybe not." I was looking like $20 for a competitive deck. I'm not going to spend $300, so that was a no go. And then unfortunately, I did play Artifact. May it rest in
Ooh.
peace. Still in my Steam tab. It's still there.
Just it's nice of you to commemorate it like that. Just have it there, just a reminder of how things can go. But obviously not the case with cards. So you talked a little bit about how, Magic requires you to dump a little bit or a lot of cash into it. What, other than the aspect of it being a little bit more free to play friendly, kind of kept you engaged and interested in cards over the last year and a half?
I think a big part of it was the community. Very quickly start talking to people in streams and on Discords and things, just getting involved with people and sort of thinking, actually, these people are really nice. I want to keep talking to them and keep being involved in them. But then also just the mechanics of the game felt unique to me. And I realize they may not feel unique to everyone. Some people may be like, "Oh, this game has that," but to me, they felt unique, and they sort of had a certain magic and spice that I quite desire in a card game. It suits me well, and I saw no reason to move on. I still see no reason to move on. Um, as far as I'm concerned, it's like the card game to play. Um, and yeah, I see no reason to move on to anything else.
Awesome. So you mentioned the community was such a big part in getting you involved and keeping you involved in the game. You talked about how you played Magic, never anything competitive. Was the community a big part of what got you involved in the more competitive side of cards as well?
Well, the competitive side is rather interesting because it wasn't on purpose.
Okay.
I remember I started playing around Christmas. I think 2 Christmases ago, and they had this special event going on where they would post like codes onto their Twitter, and you could copy them into the game and get some packs. So I was like, hell yeah, I want free packs. And then I went to play Cards, which was like the predecessor to Cards.com. And I looked at all the deck codes and I was like, this Japanese aggro deck looks really cheap to build. So I just built that and started playing. And then before I know it, I'd hit Field Marshal. I was like, that's cool, I'll keep playing. And then I was like, I recognize this guy I'm playing against. And I looked at the leaderboard and he was like top 20 and I'd kicked his ass. So I was like, this is going, wow. So I just climbed and climbed and climbed with Jagro and nothing else. And sort of solidified. Sorry, my voice. Have a drink of water. I just solidified myself in the community just for playing Jagro. And then after doing that for 3 or 4 months, sort of, even fighting for like the top 5 on the leaderboard with Jagro, I then started branching out and trying other decks. But Jagro kind of led me into the competitive scene. And then once I was there, I was able to branch out and try other things.
Awesome. And we see that, even a year and a half later, you're still involved on that side of things, but you've also done a fair amount of casting as well. So was that just kind of something naturally that came hand in hand for you with being on the competitive side, understanding the lines of play, understanding the matchups, and you decided, hey, if I can do it, I can definitely talk about it as well. What kind of got you into casting?
I've always been super interested in esports. I watch a lot of esports out of cards, just lots of different games. And I find it very interesting how the casters operate in different esports. So I was always interested in the idea of casting. So when the opportunity sort of arose to itself, I thought if I take this seriously, it could be fun. We'll see how it works. And the opportunity came up. I thought I'd give it a try, and people seem to like it.
So was there something, you mentioned obviously you enjoy watching esports, different games, different casters. Is there a certain either casting style from a game or from a specific caster or anything like that that kind of influences you or inspired you to, cast in a certain way when you're casting cards?
I always like play-by-play casting, but that can be a little bit boring for things like a card game because it's very obvious what's happening already. So I find the analytical casting to be the next thing which comes naturally. But obviously, if you have 2 casters who both want to be analytical, it's important to put a little bit of emotion and energy into the game. So I've always sort of tried to fill the role that's needed because you also need this energy, but you also need this sort of information. But if I had to choose, I'd definitely pick the more analyzing role than the emotional role.
Got it. So you'd rather talk strategy, you'd rather talk, brass tacks, go numbers, and let's say have somebody else fill in the empty space with a little bit more of that energy and just kind of, keeping things busy and upbeat in between kind of turns and things like that. Because I think you bring up a good point, right? In a card game, it's not like there's action going on every single second unless you have 2 players that are just absolutely slamming cards. So you need to have that time in between to kind of chat up, hey, what's happening, what's going to happen, and different strategies and different reasoning. So, what has you talked about kind of finding cards and you talked about, just sort of searching cards on Steam, and that was the first thing that came up. Were you much of a World War II like history buff or anything like that before jumping into cards? And is that what caught your attention, or did the game itself, just the style seem interesting and then you kind of the World War II stuff came after?
I'm nowhere near as much of a World War II history buff as some people, where they're super, super invested in it. I think a lot of people use the internet, sort of amateur into it. We watch things like videos on YouTube about it. You have those sort of 15-minute documentary channels where they just go into a particular topic. I'd watched a lot of those, but I certainly wasn't as interested in it as I am now. I had like a semi-interest in it, but now I'm very interested in it. I like to take a card, which I'm playing, and then look into the backstory of it and the history. So it might be a particular infantry regiment in say, Japan. I like to go and look at where they went, what they were up to, and just properly learn about the details and the backstory of these cards and what they represent.
And speaking of the details of the cards and things like that, I know we've had a chat before. You mentioned that you've got a little bit of a collection of some of the original artwork from some of the cards' actual card art.
Yes, I do. I don't know how visible it is behind me. I have the Gerbsjäger down here, which I butchered the pronunciation of. I have the commandos. I believe they're the number 1 commandos that one-shot everything. I have the Hummer up here, which is difficult to see. The Hummer is one of my personal favorite cards. Shout out to the fellow Hummer lovers. And then I do have the Cuban Cossacks back here, which is my tri-jewel and arguably my most important possession in life is my Cuban Cossack.
Love it. So what kind of got you into that? Where did you first kind of either discover these, or what kind of brought you to look for them altogether?
So I liked looking for the card originals. I liked learning where the original artwork was. When I found out that lots of the in-game sources for the artwork are how to put it, subpar, or to be more blunt, wrong, just wrong. And Cuban Cossacks is one of those that was really difficult to find. It took me about 4 or 5 months of looking through the internet and scouring it to find out what the original was. So as you can imagine, if you spend 4 or 5 months looking for something, when you find one of the originals being sold at a reasonable price, you're like, you know what? I've spent half a year looking for this. I'm just gonna do it. Just gonna go for it. And then from there, it just sort of spiraled out of control. I had to be careful because I was like, I could order so many of these, and then you can actually order some of the original paintings by the original artist, like the OG painting, not like any mass-produced ones for magazines or anything. But they are like $3,000 sort of dollars, and I'm like, okay, I think this is getting a little bit out of hand here when I'm looking at these.
Finding that balance is important, but I think it's so cool that you actually went back through the history, even if you're just digging it up online, to figuring out, hey, where did this actually come from, so that I can go out there and find it. Now, we've talked a little bit about, caster bubbles, expert panel bubbles, player bubbles. What about streamer bubbles? Where did you decide, hey, this is a game I want to start streaming, or had you streamed before you started playing cards?
I'd never streamed before I started playing cards. I don't remember the original reason I started streaming. I think it was just for fun and to try and teach people about the game. I like to educate people on cards because there's a lot of misconceptions, not so much about the details, but about the theory. There's a lot of misconceptions about the theory and the mindset you should have in cards. I see people getting themselves into the wrong mindset all the time and just misunderstanding the game, not in the details so much, but as a core fundamental sort of philosophy. I think what makes a lot of competitive players different from a lot of strong players but not competitive, these sort of people that might be top 100 on the leaderboard but can't reach that sort of top 10 spot, is the philosophy that these people have in cards. And when you're able to sort of move it and get it into the right position, I think you suddenly become far more effective. And it's something I struggle with myself. But I think the players that are able to really get their mindset into the best spot, these are the guys breaking the meta and killing it all the time.
So your stream almost started more as like an educational style of stream. Do you think that's evolved over time? Do you think that's something you've kind of kept as a common thread throughout your streaming career?
I think I try to educate people, but I usually end up just shouting at the game.
I think you need a balance, right?
So you got to get a balance. I certainly get emotional in cards in both directions. I don't just get frustrated, I also get very happy. But it can be draining when you have a back and forth game, and every back and forth it feels like the moment of your life. You know, you're either having your soul crushed or your soul rebuilt. A man can only have his soul crushed and rebuilt so many times in the span of 15 minutes, you know.
But that's the beauty of competition, right? Where, you know, you're on the edge of your seat, you're going back and forth, and you're trying to pull out the win. And, you know, obviously in the nature of any competitive game, it doesn't always go your way. But, you know, it's the thrill that you live for. And while you're streaming, hopefully you're conveying that to your audience as well. So you talked about being able to, you know, only have your soul crushed and rebuilt so many times going through, let's say, a 15-minute game. You did not that long ago take a little bit of a break, a pseudo retirement, if you will, from the game of cards. What kind of, where did that come from? Was it just, you know, from being a little bit beat up playing lots of games on ladder, or where, you know, where did that come from and what brought you back?
I think the reason I needed to take a break is about finding a balance. This is something some of my my good friends in the community, who I will not, you know, name any names, no names, but they learned as well, is that we aren't robots and we
Mhm.
can't play this game 24/7. Um, and if you play this game 24/7 for months on end, you then need to take a break for months on end, or at least we did. You know, everyone's different. But so I was like, I think I need to take a break, and I very much didn't want to set people up for a certain thing because I didn't know how long I'd need. So I
Yeah.
was just like, I'm gonna go. See you guys. And if I return, I return, and here I am. But now I think I've returned. I got very bored and I sort of missed the game. And I've learned how to put that balance in on a monthly basis rather than, say, a 6 monthly basis. So I'll take a week off a month instead
Yeah.
of taking off a month every 3 or 4 months. You know, it's far smaller sections, and it's about me and playing the game because I want to and having a healthy relationship rather than because I feel like I should.
And that's a part of it as well. You know, there are so many ebbs and flows that go through a card game, how the meta changes, how many hours you spend, that competitive side where, hey, I need to play X amount of games to make sure I have a chance to make it on ladder and things like that. And I'm glad you brought that up because I would like to segue a little bit into some of your competitive play. You know, you talked about, let's say, taking a week off every month, but you do need to, at the same time, if you're looking to achieve a high rank, you need to spend some time grinding away at the ladder. So coming into, you know, the game, coming into a season, what's typically your goal? Are you trying to achieve something specific on ladder? Are you just trying to qualify for the OCC? Are you looking to get into the OCC qualifier? What kind of defines how you want to spend, let's say, a season of cards?
So it used to be top 12 was my goal for most seasons, because that was the old qualification.
Mhm.
With the new qualification, it's more complicated because top six should really be your goal if you're looking to play competitively. But top six is really difficult, and it's almost not worth the stress and pressure that I'd be putting on myself to make top six. As much as I love playing competitively, you know, I am able to play competitively in other ways, and I'm able to be involved in the competitive community in other ways. So I've made an effort to not put the pressure on myself to get top six. But I'm still going for qualifications because, you know, qualifications, you can qualify through them, believe it or not. And even if I don't, I still get that competitive play. Even
Mhm.
if it's not streamed, even if I'm not playing for cash money, I still get to play against other people in a competitive environment. And that's why I play. I enjoy the competitive nature of playing against people in these environments, more than anything. It's more important to me than the prize money or the clout of doing it on a stream. I just enjoy playing against people competitively, and I can do that in qualifications. So I'm more than happy and satisfied with qualifications, and anything beyond that is just a bonus.
I think that's a great and a healthy mindset to have. You talked about it before, kind of how the mental health plays into how you're feeling about the game, and just saying, hey, if I qualify, I get to play in that the highest competitive aspect possible. Now, you know, this qualifier, obviously, like you just said, you can qualify and you did qualify. Was there something specific about how you prepared this time around, or did you just feel really good coming into it? So what kind of took you through this qualifier to make it to the main event?
So I thought that Brit Air would be meta. I was convinced Britair would be the #1 meta deck. So I prepped all 3 of my qualifier decks to beat Britair. And then the stats came, and there were 2 Britair decks in the whole event. I was like, oh no. But then through the process of double elimination brackets, I faced that 2 Britair decks 5 or 6 times. So I faced there were 2 decks out of 32 people who all bring 3 decks. So there's like 96 decks, right? And 2 of them I've built to counter, and I faced them in about 60% of my in my best of 3s. So I feel like there's a big element of luck involved here. However, I do think the decks I brought were powerful against other things. I think they were really well balanced. I do think they're a big part of why I managed to do it. But then also just momentum, in a sense. I got knocked into the lower bracket by Mooncake. And then I just started. I had my back up against the wall. I thought I just got to fight, and I just kept beating people and kept beating people. And every game I was like, if I go out, I go out. Let's just do what we can. And I just kept doing it. And I think that meant when I reached the finals and faced Mooncake again, Mooncake had been sitting around waiting because he was up a bracket, whereas I was in a sort of fighting spirit with loads of momentum on me. So I feel like I went into those finals with in a ball of rage and anger, ready to fight. Whereas Mooncake had been, sitting there waiting for me to arrive, drinking tea. I think Mooncake was really scary. I had to play him 3 times in total, once before and 2 in the finals, because the finals you had to play twice if you were low bracket. And I genuinely didn't think I could beat Mooncake. Mooncake was the player I was most scared of. And I said that to him. I said, I was most scared of facing you. So I don't know how I beat Mooncake. Other than that, it was all just sort of death balling. Just go for it.
I love drawing parallels between esports and regular sports as well. You talk about some of the matchups where team X is playing team Y, but team Y has been they've been sitting around. They finished top, they got a bye, something like that occurs, and they're not as sharp because they haven't played the extra games. And you might be a little bit tired, but that adrenaline and that energy and that momentum carries you through, even if mentally, Bubbles, you had to play more games to get to where you were. You had to win twice. There was a lot more pressure on you from that perspective, but carrying through that momentum, I think, is so interesting because it really does from a mental perspective carry through very similar to how even real sports are played.
I think there's also you never should put yourself in the lower bracket on purpose. But saying that, there is an advantage to being in the lower bracket, which is that you're ready to lose. If you're one game from defeat, you have accepted that you are, or you should have accepted loss already. You should be ready to lose. And the moment you have less to lose, you can actually take calculated risks and win. You're less afraid of taking these risks if you're ready to lose. I think there's an advantage in being in your mindset. If you think I've gone out of the tournament, I'm just going to beat up whoever I can first, I think that gives you an advantage.
Well, you're competing without a net, right? You've got to, it's your life on the line, and you have to make those big plays, and you have to take that risk. Whereas, like you said, in the top bracket, oh well, you know what? If this one doesn't work out, there's always another game. I always have another chance.
Exactly.
So now that you've made it to the main event of the OCC, from my understanding, you had a little bit of a bet going on with Mark Theist. Do you want to walk us through exactly what that was about?
So I liked the player cams because I like to use them. I like to dress up for them and mess around on the player cams. But they were inconsistent, and I'll acknowledge that the most player cams weren't that interesting. So unfortunately, they're phased out for now, and that's okay. We shouldn't write about that. It was done for good reasons, and I'll accept that. But I found the flags a bit boring, so I said, "Hey, I want to pick an interesting flag." I was told you can't pick a flag from somewhere you're not from, and I was like, "Well, the Welsh flag is interesting. It's got a dragon on it. Dragons are pretty darn cool. Give me the Welsh flag." And there was back and forth about half an hour about whether I could have a Welsh flag and all that. And then Mark said, you know what, if you can qualify, thinking Bubbles can't qualify, if you can qualify, I'll give you the Welsh flag, just to sort of shut me up. Fine, if you qualify, Bubbles, I'll give you the Welsh flag. And then I was like, I want a Welsh flag. I think that was my main motivator, was petty arguments. It's the pettiness of me. It is beyond belief, to the point where it will motivate me to qualify for a tournament just to win a petty argument. So here I am, and I'm Welsh now. I'm Welsh. To be fair, I do live right next to Wales, so I think it counts. But go Wales!
So, I mean, yeah, just pettiness and spite is a powerful motivator when, something like this is on the line. You spoke before about, hey, maybe it's not always about the cash prizes. It's just about competing at the highest level. And in this case, it's just about having a dragon on your flag. So I can definitely appreciate that, where you're coming from. Now, knowing that maybe how you prepared for the qualifier didn't exactly, I mean, at the end of the day, hey, it worked out, but maybe didn't go exactly the way you had planned. How is that going to change in preparing for the top 8 here?
So I'm a very superstitious man.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the streamer The Dyer's Gain. Now, they were talking about a certain card called the Skytrain, which some of you may not even be familiar with. It's considered one of the worst cards in the game. And they were all ragging on it in his stream. And to mess with them and to try and convince people that it's a good card, I said, this card's so good that if I make top 8 Officer Club, I will bring this card to the Officer Club to prove to you that it's a good card. Thinking that there's no way it's happening. And I'm just going to convince someone that it's a good card when it's clearly terrible. And here I am in the top 8. And I genuinely believe deep down in my heart that if I don't bring Skytrain, life will find a way to knock me out in round 1. So not only do I have to bring one of the worst cards in the game, but to play this, you have to play US Ramp, which is one of the worst deck archetypes at the moment. So I'm having to play US Ramp with Skytrain. So I think my preparation for this tournament wasn't how do I beat the meta, what do I do to get ahead. My prep for this tournament was how do I make this work? How can I take this terrible card and give myself a fighting chance of it? I've done my best shot of that, but I think I'm in trouble because of this promise I made where I'd bring this card. Yeah, I think I'm in trouble, to be honest.
So based off of this interview, Bubbles, what I'm understanding from you is that to get through the qualifier, what really drove you was just a super cool flag. And what is going to propel you through the top 8 is just an awful card. That is what I'm understanding here. Just spite, pettiness, and those 2 things are going to carry you to the winner's circle at the end of this.
That is the current position. Whether I make it to the winner's circle is well, we'll see. We'll see.
All right, fingers crossed for you. So I do have a couple more questions for you before we wrap this up. Where does your handle Innocent Bubbles come from? Where was that born?
So it's a bit of a convoluted story, but I'll tell the story because I think it's funny. My handle used to be, and prep yourself, my online handle used to be Heinz Baked Beans. And this was an attempt to get a sponsorship by Heinz Baked Beans. So I called myself Heinz Baked Beans on all the video games I played. And I sent an email to Heinz saying, hey, when I play video games with hundreds of people every day, hundreds of random people online, they all leave with a craving for baked beans. And I sent this long-ass email to Heinz, and then, I kid you not, within 5 minutes, the chief director of public communications replied to me saying no. The email just read, sorry, we will pass on this opportunity, and then his signature. I was like, well, that didn't work. So I thought, who can I get sponsored by next? And I'm sure lots of people are familiar with Innocent Drinks. They have a soft drink in the UK called Innocent Bubbles. And I was like, well, maybe I could get sponsored by Innocent Drinks next. So I was like, I'll call myself Innocent Bubbles and try and get sponsored by them. And then it just stuck as a username. And here I am. It was an attempt to get a sponsorship by a drink company, which I'm still going to try and follow through on. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting until I come onto their radar. If I pop up on their radar and they're like, "Who's this guy?" Then I strike and I go, "Sponsor me," and probably get told no.
I have asked a lot of people the question about what's behind their username, and I must say, I think this might be my favorite story so far. I love how you were proactively thinking down the line, I could get a sponsorship out of this. I need to be very specific with what I call myself. I love that. That's so good. All right, I have one more question for you because you were pointing at your card art before, and I couldn't notice that help but notice in the background. Now you have a sword, but is that a banjo above it?
It is a banjo. That is one of my officer club winnings right there. I was like, I've got a little bit of money, I could invest it, I could save it, I could blow it on a banjo. And you know what? I blew it on a banjo. It's a tenor banter. Anyone who's watched my card streams will know that I love Irish sort of folk music. And they all play the tenor banjo. I was like, that sounds cool. I want to play the tenor banjo. So I bought it. I do play it. It doesn't just sit there. I do play it. But I'm so terrible at it. It's unbelievable how bad I am. Hopefully one day I'm good, but I will never be as good as the sort of songs I listen to, where they're doing like 10,000 plucks a second. Their fingers are all over the place, and it's funny because the guys that play it, they look like withered, sort of dying corpses. They look like they've been drinking for 60 years. And that they're struggling to stay alive. They move at a snail's pace, but then they pull out the banjo, and suddenly they have like they have the energy of a young child. It's incredible.
I love that even the banjo is tied back into cards. It's so good. And hopefully, yes, you're not. Well, I can appreciate you wanting to play like some of your idols. I can hope that looking like a withered old 60-year-old alcoholic is maybe not exactly what you're going for, but I can appreciate you aiming for some of your idols. Bubbles, thank you so much for chatting with me. I appreciate getting a little bit of insight into all kinds of things, including your banjo. But before we wrap up here, is there anything you would like to say to the cards community?
Just to stay focused, because I see a lot of people worrying about the future of the game. And I think that's not worth worrying about. Some things die, some things live. We will only have to wait and see, but it's not our job to worry about it. It's our job as the people that play the game to love it and enjoy it and get the most out of it where we can. I think the game will live for a long time and be very successful. But to the people that are worried about it and they're concerned about the future, stop worrying about the future and enjoy the now. If you want to play the game, open it up and play it. If you're not feeling it, that's okay. Play something else. But just focus on getting the love and enjoyment you can out of it, and rinsing every last bit of fun out of the game, rather than what's going to happen in 5 years down the line. Because I think it's important, if you truly love this game and you truly enjoy it, just to get the love and enjoyment out of it that you can right now. And in 5 or 10 years time, you probably will be doing something else within your life, and you probably won't even care. And you'll be glad you'll be more glad that you got enjoyment out of it than that you worried about what was going to happen. So just stay focused on what's important. So don't get too sidetracked, and just keep your eyes on why you downloaded the game, why you first opened the game, what you fell in love with those first 100 hours, and stop worrying, because it'll probably be okay. But if it isn't, you would have been best off having a good time while you could.
I do not think there is a better way for us to end this interview. Thank you so much for coming on the War Room one more time, Bubbles, and sharing a little bit of your backstory with us.